Hey everybody, it's Jason Cruz here once again with MMA Payouts, the interview. And today we are lucky to have the natural, Randy Couture. He is here to talk about PFL 7. The playoffs begin in Friday, August 4th in San Antonio, and Randy is going to be a part of it. You'd like to ask everybody before I start, how are you doing?
I'm doing great, thanks. Yeah, everything's good. Just got back from Seattle. I had a big charity ride up there on Saturday, and that's my old stomping grounds up at home, up in Everett, where I grew up. So it was nice to see family and friends, and we had a very successful ride. About 150 bikes showed up, and we raised some significant money for my foundation for wounded combat veterans. So it was
Well,
awesome.
that's awesome and great to hear. And you had some great weather for it. Now we're going off a little bit subject, but tell me where you guys rode.
Oh, we did a poker run. So
Okay,
pick 4 or 5 stops around the Everett, Marysville, Stanwood area up there, north of Seattle. That's the
okay.
area where I grew up. And each stop you get a card and you build a poker hand, and we give out prizes for worst hand and best hand and stuff like that. So it's fun.
Well, that's awesome. And since we're talking about the Northwest here, Seattle just recently had the MLB All Star Game last week in Seattle, and it was fun. It's kind of like the halfway point for Major League Baseball. I feel as though we're kind of at a point in the PFL where we could kind of talk about outstanding fighters in this season so far. Can you give us some names or a name of a fighter that in your mind stands out this season?
Wow. Well, Josh Silveira is looking great and looks to be on track. He made it to the finals last year, coming all the way through the Challenger Series and getting into the playoffs. So he's got a great shot and a ton of, experience, with his legend father, Conan Silveira. This kid literally grew up in the gym. And I think he's at that age now, 26, 27 years old after his wrestling career at Arizona State, where he's really kind of coming into his own. Um, Tough weight class. It's going to be an interesting day for sure. I mean, Martin Hamlet is starting to figure out how to fit his wrestling background as a Greco-Roman Olympic wrestler into MMA situations as well. He's a big, raw, strong fighter. He's facing Impa Kasanganay, who's a very interesting story in his own right, coming out of Africa, living in a yurt in Florida and
Yes.
training, kind of living the simple life. Pretty interesting character for sure. That's the light heavyweight division. I mean, every single weight class. I'm sorry to hear yesterday that we lost Movlid Haibalayev,
Oh.
out of the lightweight division,
Mhm.
and he was a favorite, a former champ, and but that kind of opens the door for maybe a Chris Wade or Brendan Loughnane getting back in the mix there. Now, obviously, Brendan suffered a defeat in his last outing to get him into the playoffs with Jesus Pinedo coming out of the Challenger Series and surprising everybody with that knee up the middle that ended Brendan's night. So,
Yes.
um,
Yes.
there's a plethora of amazing fighters in this league, and Movlid Haibalayev was one of those guys that everybody was watching. He's so amazing as a grappler and a wrestler, but his striking is phenomenal. You talk about Magomed Kirmov. He's another one, in that lightweight division that's very, very tough, former champ. But actually, he's at 170. Sorry, but he won it, and then Ray Cooper and him went back and forth, and some pretty amazing rivalries there. But there's a lot of great guys in this whole organization. Obviously, you want to talk about some of those big names, Kayla Harrison, obviously, which I think you're going to see in next year's pay-per-view model, along with Francis Ngannou, who was probably the biggest signing in the sport's history when he signed with the PFL this year. So
Most definitely.
definitely headed in the right direction.
He is making some big waves, big waves. But let's head back to another Arizona State wrestler by the name of Bubba Jenkins, and
Yeah.
he looks like he is the favorite. I guess if you're a betting person, bet favorite as far as making it to New York. Once again, he has the Cinderella, like you just said, Jesus Pinedo. I watched that card where Brendan Loughnane looked like he was at least in control, and Pinedo hit him with a knee up the middle. They panned to the back where Chris Wade looked shocked, and I didn't know at the time that he was eliminated, but I didn't
Yeah.
know Loughnane was eliminated. Pinedo shocked the PFL, How do you see this fight going down between Jenkins, who has made strides within the PFL since signing on, and Pinedo?
You know, I think Bubba Jenkins looks to be the best that we've seen him. You know, he obviously has an amazing wrestling pedigree. He was an NCAA champion for Arizona State. His loss 2 seasons ago to Chris Wade, I think, humbled him a little bit, and he recognized that he kind of got out wrestled, which is very unusual. Chris Wade is no slouch. He's been knocking on that door for a while, and that created a big rivalry that Brendan Loughnane and Bubba Jenkins kind of got into last season. Mm-hmm. Obviously, Brendan Loughnane beat Chris Wade in the semifinal, and then it had Bubba in the final, and had an amazing performance against Bubba. But I think we're seeing the best Bubba we've seen. His striking is on point. Dewey Cooper's got him letting his hands go and not being intimidated about stepping in that pocket. And that striking is going to allow him to be more effective with his wrestling as well. And we've seen that. He's got that ability to take guys down and smother them and make their life miserable from that top position. It's going to be interesting to see how he deals with a very game Jesus Pinedo, who's obviously coming off the biggest fight of his life, beating last year's champion Brendan Loughnane. It's going to be very interesting to see how he deals with Bubba. He better be ready to stuff some takedowns and not let Bubba get some momentum, put him on his back, and really kind of grind on him, as Bubba has a tendency to do. So it'll be an interesting matchup for sure. But I think we're looking at the best Bubba Jenkins I feel like we've seen since he's come to the PFL.
Now, with that being said, if you're Pinedo or you train Pinedo, you've been around MMA a long time, so you know how it would be, not yourself personally, but how would it be as an underdog? What do you tell an underdog who's made it this far? You know, how do you go up against a guy who's probably on top of his game right now?
Yeah, I think underdog or not, I don't think you plug into any of that as a fighter. All that media stuff just has to trickle off your back. You never plug into that. You never buy into any of that. The same thing with the fans. A lot of time, the fans have their favorites, and you're only as good as your last fight many times with the fans. So you really got to make sure as a fighter you're not plugging into any of that. Stay laser focused on your game plan, on how you solve the problems that guy across the ring from you poses. Now, Jose Pinedo's got a Jose. I keep calling him Jose. It's Jesus Pinedo. He's going to smack me when I see him, but. Jesus Pinedo's got to look at that wrestling ability. If you study Bubba at all, he has his most success when he's able to take guys down and mix it up. Now he's a formidable striker. He's explosive, and he's letting his hands and feet go a lot more than we've seen him. And I think that makes his wrestling that more effective. So, but at the end of the day, he's going to try and take you down, put you on the mat, and just grind you out if you give him the chance. So Jesus has got to be ready to stop those takedowns, force that striking, make it ugly, get in his face. Make him take back steps. If Bubba doesn't like to move backwards. He wants to keep moving forward if he can. So I think if you're studying him, that's what Jesus has to look at, how to solve the problem with Bubba Jenkins.
Yeah, definitely. Bubba is on top of his game and looks to be the favorite in that division at this particular point. Now let's move on to the light heavyweight division. We talked about it a little bit. Rob Wilkinson is out. So and now it to me it feels like it's up in the air. You know, now everybody I've talked to Kenny Florian and Sean O'Connell, and they believe they are high, and you seem to be high on Josh Silveira as a potential person to make it to New York, make it to the final. How do you see that matchup with Ty Flores going down?
You know, Ty's been up and down. He's a solid performer. He's been up and down through the regular season, and he showed some signs of greatness in real tenacity in his last outing to get him in this position to be where he's at. So, I mean, he's not going to go away easy, but I think if you talk about tools in the tool belt and absolute ability, Josh Silveira is just looking like he's coming into his own, you know, rallying up a last year's final and coming up a little bit short, I think only motivated him to continue to really analyze, be a student of the game, enjoy that passion that he seems to have for this sport and has had since he was 5 or 6 years old. Pretty remarkable athlete and performer. So, you know, I think it favors Josh tactically, the matchup. But you can't count a guy like Ty Flores out. He's going to be in it for sure. So it's going to be up to Josh to go out there and impose his will, make it as difficult on Ty Flores as he can. And I would say the same thing as in the other light heavyweight bout with Martin Hamlet and Impa Kasanganay. And Impa's as athletic as anybody out there. He maybe doesn't have the experience on paper, but he showed that he's got a very good fight IQ and ability. Hamlet is still kind of trying to figure out who he is and how his Olympic wrestling background fits into MMA. And each season he seems to get a little bit better, a little bit more refined, knows exactly where he needs to spend his energy and where he doesn't. And I think at some point he's going to be a very, very formidable guy in this division because of that background and because of that raw ability that he has as he continues to refine that. I think both of those are going to be great matchups. If I had to pick two guys that I think probably going to come out of that, and it's a tough call, I think, with Hamlet and Kasanganay, I favor lean a little bit towards Josh Silveira in the other fight.
Interesting. Now, this kind of leads us up to a question for your predictions, maybe prognostications. Is there a fighter that you would be very surprised does not make it to the finals in New York? It could be Bubba Jenkins, it could be Sada Busai, it could be Olivia Aubin Mercier. Is there a guy who you would be super surprised that they don't make it through the brackets?
I would be very, very surprised if Aubin Mercier doesn't make it through to the final. This is one of the most cerebral fighters, athletically gifted, obviously, but he has an awareness of where to put himself in positions to win fights, no matter what the crowd's doing, no matter who his opponent is. He just like beating Shane Burgos in that first match. I mean, that's a tough matchup for anybody. This is a banger. That you stand around in front of this guy, he will knock your head off. And Aubin Mercier figured out how to negate that, how to take him out of that game and that ability where he's so tough and so strong. He's done that time and time again. He manages to come up with a game plan and stick to it no matter what the guy throws at him. And that's going to make him tough for anybody to deal with.
Now, is this something that he just as a fighter, OAM, I call him OAM because I mess up the
OAM is a lot easier to say than
Olivier
Aubin Mercier.
OAM. Is there something that you have seen over the years in his progression as a fighter, from the days when he was in the UFC to now when he's signing with the with PFL, and now he seems to have made it full circle from somebody who failed in the playoffs to now last year winning the $1 million to now looking very dominant this season? Is there something in his game? Was it strength? Is it more
I think 2 seasons ago, the only thing that kept him out was an injury. And he couldn't continue in the season. Last year, he came through and he won it, and he did it in stellar fashion. He beat a lot of people that most people didn't think he would beat. He's already beat some people this season, including Shane Burgos, that most people didn't think he was going to win. And I think a lot of that is this is a sport of experience. He's been in this game quite a long time. He obviously came from an amazing camp with George St. Pierre, TriStar, and that whole program. And he is finally, I think, maturity-wise, just come into his own, knows who he is, knows how he needs to fight, doesn't care about any of this extraneous stuff. He's laser focused on what he needs to do to put himself in the best position to win. And that only comes with maturity. He's just matured as a fighter. And I think he didn't have that, even 2 or 3 years ago, maybe as much as he does right now.
And definitely, it's awesome to see him progress and get reap the rewards of his training. You mentioned there George St. Pierre, and this leads me to a fun question I have for you. GSP recently announced that he will be going back to grappling. He'll be on a grappling tournament. Mm-hmm. Have you, Randy Couture, ever entertained the thought of entering perhaps a grappling tournament of some sort? I asked Sean O'Connell earlier this morning, your broadcast partner, if he would ever, challenge for the light heavyweight title again. He said no. But would you, the natural Randy Couture, a decorated MMA figure, Hall of Fame guy, would you ever consider getting back in and at least on the grappling mats?
This is interesting because I was in this situation when I retired from the sport for a little while, and I was going through a divorce, felt like I needed to step away and kind of find myself again and let the dust settle. And in that 13-month interim, I stepped into the professional submission league match against Jacare de Souza.
Oh, yeah.
And And it was that match, that grappling match, that ignited that fire again and let me know that I wasn't done. It wasn't time to hang it up. It was time to get back out there. And it wasn't very long after that that the Tim Sylvia fight was signed, and I was back in the cage and fighting. And I feel like there's a similar thing going on with George right now. And he's had inklings over the years about coming back, about fighting Khabib, about this and that and the other guy. And so I think the fire is still there a little bit. And I expect he's going to go out. He's going to grapple in this tournament, and he's going to find that fire is in full force, and we may see him back in the cage. It may motivate him and make him realize that he has some more fighting to do. It'll be interesting to see. I, on the other hand, have nothing else to do. The discs in my neck are all but worn out from the years of wrestling and years of fighting, and that was one of the decisions I had to make when I came to terms with walking away from the sport when I did at 47 years old. I just turned 60 a couple weeks ago. I would love to be grappling, honestly, and competing in grappling tournaments, but I don't want to have a neck surgery. And there's no way to do that halfway. You either grapple or you don't, in my opinion. There's no way to do it slow. There's no way to half-ass it. You're either doing it or you're not doing it. And I don't really want to have a neck surgery. I try to take care of this neck now since retiring in 2011. I don't want to have a fusion or any of that stuff. I'm not a candidate for disc replacement, which is a newer technology. I'm too old already. So I'm not going to play around, even though I still have the desire to get on that mat and grapple and compete. I'm not going to play around and take a risk and risk an injury that's going to affect the quality of the rest of my life. That's the truth of the matter.
That's very smart. And obviously, if O'Connell ever tried to shoot on you, you'd stuff the takedown.
We always see Sean. We have such a good time in the booth. Look at that, Sean. That guy's moving his head. Can you believe that? We always laugh.
Awesome. Randy, thank you so much for your time. We greatly appreciate it. We'll be watching Friday, August 4th from San Antonio, the first of 3 or 4 PFL cards. 3?
3, yeah.
3.
First is in San Antonio. The second and third are in New York City in the Hulu Theater at Madison Square Garden. So it's going to be
awesome.
Amazing run.
Some great stuff for hot August nights. Randy Couture, thank you so much once again for your time. We greatly appreciate it.
Thanks, man. Appreciate you having me on. Be well.
You too. Thank you so much for your time. Appreciate it.
You bet, man.
Have a good